Welcome to the talk show Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. The goal of this show is to provide a learning experience to people of all ages, with guests from various fields in academics, a wide range of industries, and insight into the many forms of art, athletics, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy the show. Artem Kolesov is our guest today. One of the great violinists in music today, Artem will speak about his journey to musical success. Artem will also speak about the dangers of being an openly gay musician from Russia.
Artem Kolesov, welcome to Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.
Thank you for having me. Thank
Pleasure.
you so much.
Pleasure. Artem, how did you first find your passion for music?
I believe that I was about 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, when I first heard someone play violin, and this someone then became my violin teacher. So she was a violinist, a local violinist in the little town that I grew up in. And she was incredible, and I just thought that it was the most beautiful instrument I've ever heard. And that the rest of is history.
It's certainly a lot of history it is, especially for somebody your age. I remember I played the clarinet for years, and I wanted to play the trumpet because I heard somebody playing the trumpet, my favorite musician, Maynard Ferguson. And then that was a little too hard for me, so I went to the clarinet. I just say that because I love the fact that you heard someone else and decided that you wanted to do what they were doing. But I've never heard anyone say to me, I heard someone and I wanted to be like them, and they became my teacher. So I think that's really incredible stuff. So you did start young. You said like at age 6, you started to really have a love of music. But I know that coming from Russia, it was expensive to have these lessons with this mentor. And I know that you got some money for winning contests as a young person. So what is it like performing in contests as such a young person and winning money for doing what you love?
Yeah, there was definitely some pressure, and especially because I started playing violin not for that specific reason. I just wanted to learn how to play a musical instrument. And then I think at the age of 8 is when I first won a competition that was paying me like a monthly stipend. And I guess my family was just happy that I could help somehow. So I wish that we didn't live in a world where kids had to do that, but I was happy that I was able to help my family somehow. And actually, there were a few stipends that I got along the way that my mother would receive later, even when I already moved to Canada to study at a university there at the age of 16. So I think my mom kept receiving this one specific stipend until I was 19. So, they are my family, and I'm glad that I was able to somehow help their financial situation. But, there's definitely a lot of pressure in terms of like not winning or, not getting the first prize. Yeah.
So my question is, first an observation. I had 2 clarinet teachers through my life. One was played beautifully, loved it. Just an okay teacher. I had someone else who was a decent musician, but a phenomenal teacher. So how do you translate your abilities as a student and now performer, and I guess you're always a student, always learning, to being a teacher and now helping others achieve what you achieved?
I think that it's always a great challenge because every human being that I teach is different, and we all have different physicalities and different, skills, different ways that we can control our fingers. But I think focusing on, for me specifically, I like to focus on something that a lot of other teachers also focus on, and that's just developing this love and appreciation for music and violin. And I think that to me, it's the most important thing that the student is enjoying what they're doing and also understands why they're doing it, because growing up, I had teachers who would explain things to me and take time to really show me why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then I also had teachers who just told me that this is the way that it is, and I just have to kind of do it. And unfortunately, the latter was not very helpful because I often came out doing something but not knowing how I got there. And that meant that I wasn't able to troubleshoot some of the things that, if something happened along the way, I wasn't sure how to fix something in the moment. And this is what I'm focusing on right now as I teach, and not just the People's Ensemble. I also have a pretty large piano and violin studio here in Los Angeles. And I try to always explain to my students like the origins of something like the violin and piano, and their connection to the historical past, and so people understand these things in the context of why these things develop. Like, for example, when I teach piano, I ask people, why are the keys these certain colors? And it is actually connected to the trade from Africa of certain materials that were being traded with Europe. And a lot of people don't know that, so because we are kind of often taught to think of things existing in almost a vacuum. And for me, teaching violin is also something that is important to connect to the historical past. So, for example, the community that I'm currently working with, it is a primarily Black and Latina community. And when you come in to teach violin in a community such as that, I think that it requires a certain level of understanding of, the past and present way that these communities have been treated in the US. And that also informs me as a teacher of what kind of challenges and what kind of things we will run into along the way. And often it's about resources and money and time, because learning violin takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. And, a lot of people think that they're going to go for a 30-minute lesson and they're going to be incredible. Or they are instead very self-deprecating. I think that's the word. Where they think that just because they weren't able to achieve, Jascha Heifetz level playing in 3 months, then they must be very bad, and they forget that someone like me, like the first year that I was spending learning violin was mainly just, my teachers were focused on developing my ear, developing my sense of rhythm. As a 6-year-old, I would go to different classes that are not just violin, like music theory and solfege. And also I was in a choir, because it is very important for people to have this kind of sense of community when you're learning. And this is what the People's Ensemble is really focused on, just kind of people uplifting each other, and us learning at the same time. And I am learning a lot from this community as well, and from this ensemble as I'm teaching them. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there is a lot more that goes on into playing and learning violin than just the actual, the mechanical motion of playing the violin, because there's this, connection to the inner image and kind of imagining of the sound that you want to get out of the instrument. Because like what I noticed, for example, is that when I first give the violin to someone and don't explain anything, don't show them what violin sounds like, people often just kind of assume that they just have to press down, which is one of the things that we don't want to do on the violin. And sometimes it's also a very good way for me to analyze, like, oh, what do these people usually do? Like, if I give them the violin and I explain what kind of sound we want to, or if I don't explain, right? So I kind of have this chance to really learn a lot more about how much information people really need before they start playing violin. And usually it does help them if they hear someone, like if I perform for them first and then they try playing violin, because now they have seen an in-person performance. And I usually try to start with something gentle, with something that isn't as violent or I guess as loud and as they say, bombastic. So people really start developing this relationship that is gentle and caring with the violin, because it is a very fragile instrument. And I think that it's important for people to understand, again, the mechanical like production of the sound, and also kind of have this sound in their ear. So before they even begin, they already know what to look for.
I do want to switch a little bit to the fact, Artem, that you captured international attention after posting actually on YouTube and coming out as gay. This, of course, is never easy, certainly not for a young person or for anybody at times, but you're the son of two Pentecostal pastors and you're living near Moscow. So how did you navigate such an incredibly difficult childhood once that became, for lack of a better term, common knowledge?
I would say that it's really interesting because there is always this duality of, growing up in something that is like a cult, which I would say that unfortunately the way that the community that I grew up in was set up was very cult-like. And it's interesting because, when you are in it, you don't really understand that you are in a situation like that. And then as you grow up and you start noticing these patterns, and just these issues around you, you kind of start to understand that something is not quite right. So for the first few years, I definitely, I already started noticing certain things around me as a child, and unfortunately, I was just told that this is from the devil, like any kind of doubting or questioning of what's going on. And then when the opportunity arose for me to go study in Canada, it was a difficult decision because it meant, like, I kind of had an idea that I will probably not come back, but my family is still there, and most of my friends that I made as a child
Right.
are still there as well. So at 16 years old, it was definitely scary, and there was a lot of uncertainty when I was going to Canada, but at the same time, I felt like it was a way for me to escape this community. And, there's always fear when you're leaving something like this. And when you were told for most of your life that the world is scary and sinful and really bad, and you're going to die immediately, which is unfortunately how a lot of people are kept in these kind of situations as well. And, I will be honest and say that I was mad at my parents for quite a long time. But as I started to analyze the situation, I understood that it's an issue that is really more encompassing and is not just something that is happening in Russia. Because, for example, my parents were not Christians before the age of about 25 for both of them. And what happened is that after the Soviet Union was dissolved, a lot of people felt a lot of uncertainty, and especially leading up to it, there were a lot of rioting. There was a lot of rioting in the 80s, a lot of instability because a lot of things were changing in terms of economic policy, and a lot of people were just really suffering and struggling. And it's really interesting because I wasn't born in the 80s. I was born in 1994, but the stories that I heard from my friends and family and neighbors around me growing up, what I'm seeing, like the kind of instability that I'm seeing right now around the world and in the United States, it's very similar to what was going on back then as well. So a lot of people felt like they couldn't really rely on anything, and they really felt very insecure about their financial situation and political as well. And they couldn't really trust in tomorrow. And what was going to happen next day. So I would say that it definitely made me understand and kind of analyze the bigger picture much more once I moved to North America, because a lot of the missionaries that would come to our churches past, after the Soviet Union was dissolved, they were from the United States. They were from southern states, and often I was telling some of my friends recently that I was so used to just waking up and there being missionaries in our home, just like these random people that our church would tell us to house. And it also, there are a lot of psychological impacts of just having strangers in your home 24/7, and you don't know when they're going to leave or when they're going to arrive. So I think that this is history that a lot of people don't talk about, and they don't really look at that as something that happened and that impacted people. So, I think that I did some growing up, and even though I was a little bit mad at my parents in the beginning, I started realizing that they were really suffering. They were really going through a lot before I was born and during the 90s, because I don't know, you probably know about this because you probably heard about how difficult the 90s were in Russia and in other post-USSR states. And there was a lot of just horrible things going on, a lot of people became homeless overnight, right? And I know that the trope of beautiful Eastern European women, being kind of like a call girl, it also came from the 90s, where it's also connected to the sex trade. And so for me, growing up in this church and all of these horrible things actually happening outside of our little community, they were actually a very good justification for my mom and for my parents to tell me oh, you see, if you don't listen to us, it's gonna, something bad is gonna happen to you. So it was an actual real fear for all of us that, there were hundreds of thousands of little children sold into sexual slavery after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And no one really talks about that. People usually celebrate that event as if it was something that was good, discounting millions of lives that were affected and people that, died from homelessness, from instability and insecurity in terms of medical care and so on. So, yeah, it's not really something that people mention here.
Right. Well, we always talk on the show about the story behind the glory, and look how much you went through. But I have to say two things. First of all, I have ties older than you. So when you say 94 and that's when you're born, that's amazing. But what I love, and I hope young people will watch this and realize that you didn't judge your parents just based on what was on the surface. You analyzed the situation, you empathized, and you learned more about why certain decisions were made. And I think that's outstanding. So what is next for Artem Kolesov?
Well, I'm finishing up my fellowship with the Wallace Performing Arts Center, which is how I'm able to do a program such as the People's Ensemble. And I'm currently also working with several people in Los Angeles who are hoping to continue this program. And so we're hoping to turn this into something that will continue past my fellowship. And, because there has been a great response from people who have been showing up to our meetings and are going to be participating in the ensemble performance on June 3rd, which I wish I could invite you, but I know you're in Chicago. But
no,
if you're,
I'm actually in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, in Pennsylvania. Sorry.
No, I get to LA sometimes, and I always look up people who've been on my show. So I think it's wonderful things that you're doing.
Yeah. So if you are here on June 3rd, we would love to have you. But we're also thinking to film it and post it on YouTube so people have these memories. The event is focused on remembrance because I think during such times as what we're living through right now, I think that collective memory, this is what we're focused on, remembering something as a community that was affected by a lot of and is affected by a lot of what is happening right now, and such thing as the ongoing pandemics and economic instability and just people not really knowing what's going to happen. And another thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm involved with a program in Mexico. So they provide free education in music for children from several different communities. So there is one in near Mexico City, and there's also one in Tijuana, and I think in Ensenada, and one more place that is a much smaller place. I think it's like more of a little village where people often go to just give music lessons. And so we're going to be starting this one in the summer. And I'm working with the Benning family. They are a big luthier, which is like a violin shop in the United States, in California. And so they invited me to also participate in this program, which is something that I really look forward to. And so we've been trying to develop that alongside with the People's Ensemble as well. So it's just been a lot of, I've been very busy.
Sure. Sounds it. Yeah. That's unbelievable. Artem Kolesov, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, sharing your experiences in music, as well as sharing a very personal story about overcoming your adversity and struggles and how you dealt with it. So thank you for that. To the viewers, don't forget to watch us on E360 TV, available on Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. EST. Also available on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Remember to follow us on social media. Life Stories with Marc Hoberman is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and of course, our YouTube channel. So Artem, thank you so much for being here today. I wish you continued success. Thank you.
Thank you much for having me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. To contact Marc, email him at info@lifestorieswithmarchoberman.com or visit him on social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.